Hello, I am Megan Baer. I am the Director of Development at the UChicago Network for College Success. It's so good to see all of you. It's the Network for College Success uses research, data, and practitioner experience really as the foundation for our work to provide professional learning, coaching, and supports to educators and school leaders. We build educator capacity to ultimately improve student outcomes. I'm going to take just a minute here to show you our vision and mission. I'm not going to read it to you. Some of you might know it and love it already, and some of you might be seeing it for the first time. So take about 30 seconds and just read through our mission and vision. So I want to call out one sentence that I think is going to be really important to our time together today and the conversation we're going to have. And that's the sentence in the vision. We imagine schools in which all students excel academically and develop the agency, integrated identity, and competencies necessary to have successful lives as adults. We believe this is really tied to the student experience, how students experience school, and how we learn from their experiences, how educators learn from their experiences and how it informs their practice is really critical to their agency, their identities, and their competencies. And we also believe this cycle, right, of hearing from students and changing our practice and learning from students, it creates a healthier, happier, and more challenging school environment, a positive student environment, a positive learning environment that helps kids not just succeed in school, but in their futures as well. A few years ago, the Network for College Success developed an organizational equity stance, and we could share that with you in a little bit if you're not familiar with it. But our organizational equity stance really centered our work with each other as staff members, with educators, with schools, with districts, and with you, with the philanthropic community. And that stance really seeks the collective liberation of Black, Latinx, and people of color. And we believe that education is really critical to that effort. We know that anti-racist and culturally responsive educational practices improve student outcomes, which in turn improve student experiences, which in turn improve student outcomes. Grounded in our equity stance, a few months ago, we were compelled to write a letter titled "In Response to White Violence." And we wrote about the inhumane death of Adam Toledo, a 7th grade Latinx boy living in Chicago. We wrote about the deaths of Asian women and Black men and members of the Sikh community, all due to white violence. And we continue to see alarming acts of white violence now, such as the recently discovered burials in boarding schools for Native children. As a white woman in this work, who's committed to this work, I must seek ways of being and thinking that are grounded in humanity and community. In that letter, we wrote that through the despair, through all that hardship, we saw the value of the work that we do together, the work that we do with educators in schools in service of students. We saw that our efforts to improve the daily lived experiences of students in their classroom and schools, of lifting their voices and encouraging their agency, that matters. And we saw that whether they feel that their teachers care about them and that they belong in school, that matters. That education is not just about preparing for the future, it's also about love and joy and the moments of connection between an adult and a young person. I hope you hold that with you today as we engage with each other, as you hear the conversations that are to come. And with that in mind, here's just a brief run through of our agenda. So we have opening moves, which we're doing right now. In just a few minutes, we'll go through a community builder We'll hear from our co-executive directors. And really kind of the heart of today's event is this conversation with two of my colleagues, Jillian and Sarah. And then we'll end with some Q&A. And you know, this wouldn't be an NCS event if we didn't have some opportunities for you to speak to each other and learn from each other. So we'll have some breakout groups sprinkled in between. And this is us. This is who you'll be hearing from today. Some faces might be familiar to you, some faces might be new. So we really look forward to engaging with you and you hearing from us. Just a few more things before we get moving to the community builder. More like virtual expectations. We are really going to go right to 4:30 today. So if you need a break, take care of yourself and take a break because we won't schedule one here. We'd love to see your face whenever possible. So if you can, and if you're able, keep your camera on. And always feel free to ask questions in the chat box. We might not answer them right away. We might get to them at the end during the Q&A, or if we don't get to them today, we'll certainly circle back with you later. So with that in mind, I'm going to take it over to Kayla, who's going to lead us through a community builder.
Thank you, Meg. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla Brown. I'm the Development and Communications Associate with NCS. We are now going to transition into our community builder. We will ask you to take 6 minutes to complete the PERT survey. While you're completing this survey, picture a high school teacher that you remember vividly. This can be a positive or negative experience, but just think of a high school teacher that you have a clear memory of. Welcome back, everyone. I see people are slowly but surely coming into the main room. I hope that you all had riveting and engaging discussions in your breakout groups. I would love to see any key insights in the chat box. So if you could type in anything that came up for you during your discussion and just press enter, that'd be great.
What was that about pressing enter? We were late coming back.
Oh, no worries. Just anything that came up for you, any key insights from your breakout room discussion, please put in the chat box. Teachers in the 80s were just talking at us, from Sarah Howard.
Someone told her age.
Relationships, relationships, relationships. Let's see if we can get one.
Credit Mike Shield there.
We didn't talk about students' cultural identity at all. And then how would virtual learning have supported students better if teachers asked themselves and their students these questions? Remember the teachers that had an impact, both positive and negative. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your insights in the chat box. And thank you all so much for being part of the community builder today. I'm going to now turn it over to our co-executive directors, Jacqueline Lemon and Sarah Duncan.
I saw two other comments, one about remembering the teachers who made me feel special. Yes, I agree with that. And teachers who really stuck to the content and that's it, and didn't consider other things that make us human. So thank you for that. Hello, everyone. I'm just rambling and didn't introduce myself. I am Jacqueline Lemon. It is a pleasure to see some familiar faces. Again, this is a group of folks because of the way Sarah Duncan and I divide our work. I don't get to see you often, so I'm excited when I do see you. And there's some new faces that I don't know, so I'm looking forward to getting to know you. Again, I'm Jacqueline Lemon. I'm one of two executive directors. NCS has always had a non-traditional leadership model, and Sarah Duncan and I continue that tradition. I am primarily responsible for implementation. And so my charge is to very quickly give you a very high-level overview of what we've been up to this past year. So I don't know how many of you have been with us and remember we had our 10-year anniversary of over 5 years ago. And during that 10-year anniversary, we drafted a new strategic plan because while we felt great success, we weren't satisfied and wanted more. So we built a new strategic plan and decided that if we wanted to see new results, we had to change the way we ourselves were showing up. So the beginning of that strategic plan, we have a unifying theme in our office that no matter what job you're doing and no matter what work you're doing, you connect your work to that theme. That theme was learn, plan, pilot. There's a lot of new staff. There was new funding. We wanted new, stronger results. So we wanted to give people to learn new research frameworks, to try new things, and to really begin to translate the research into practice, which is what we're charged to do. This past year, this theme evolved into implement, measure, and refine, because we've done some learning about improvement science, and there is research about how to get better. So we are working really hard on getting better at getting better. And one of the ways that we do that is we measure our ways of working far more frequently than we have been in the past. We don't want to wait to see outcomes to say, oh, we were wrong about that thing we tried, or our theory of action was incorrect. So while we did look at formative data in the past, I would say we didn't look as frequently as we are now with as many indicators. So this work that you are primarily funding, thank you. Here's what we've been up to this past year. So yes, so you're going to hear more about this later. I know that you cannot read these slides. They're snapshots of data dashboards, but our instruction team for the first time really unapologetically integrated student voice. And so what they did is they collected data around how students are experiencing the classroom with their teachers, because we know certain conditions in a classroom make learning more optimal. So we wanted to hear what students were saying about those optimal conditions. That team, and Jillian, you'll correct me in anything I say incorrectly, ran 5 cycles of data this year from the students' perspective. They coached teachers who were working with these students, and I am really proud to say that they had profound impact. And the teachers that they were coaching, we saw growth from cycle 1 through cycle 5. And in fact, in some instances, the teachers who showed growth were outpacing other folks in the nation. So more on that later. Our post-secondary team, I know this is hard to see, also collected student voice from a different lens though. Instead of what is the classroom experience, they were collecting data around how is a student experiencing the school in its entirety, because we know that to get strong post-secondary results, it cannot be the job of just the counselor. That schools must build a culture of post-secondary success, and that requires all of the adults in the building to get involved. So these surveys ask students about whether or not adults were providing support, whether or not they're sharing power, whether or not they're expanding students' possibilities. That's a tough one across the nation. And so we're really pleased about this. We did this on a voluntary basis this year. And Sarah Howard, you correct me if I'm wrong on anything. And it looks like more counselors want to take this up moving into next year. And we're hoping that this will have some impact, although a lagging indicator on some of our post-secondary indicators. If we've learned anything from the pandemic, and we should have known this before, we've got to listen to the students. We really have to listen to them and their experiences. You can go to the next slide. Again, hard to read. Leadership coaches worked really hard on taking up issues of equity with principals. There's a lot of data here that unfortunately I don't have time to unpack, but they required principals to really hold up the mirror, to think about the skin they're in. So how do I, as a Black woman, uphold white supremacy culture? And how am I maintaining the status quo? And they challenged principals with that. And what they further challenged principals with is to not just provide lip service to equity work and not to have performative allyship, but to actually make a change in their schools. So one of the things that they measured and tracked is how many principals were disrupting inequitable policies and procedures and changing them. We are very proud to say that we've tracked that. We have examples of that, of where principals really, really made some policy changes in their schools based on some inequities. Really proud of that. And then the last one, our freshman success team. They really, really are our lead learners on improvement science. And they push schools to run what we call plan, do, study, act cycles for schools to figure out really what's the real problem you're trying to address. Because sometimes we're addressing the wrong thing. We make assumptions. What is the small thing you're going to test with a small group of students in a small classroom? This may not, or one classroom, it may not seem like a big deal to you, but traditionally in the field of education, someone at the Board of Ed gets an idea and then everybody do it. It becomes get people to comply. And then we find out certain places have different contexts and have to do it their way. So we are pushing our schools to run really, really small tests of change to see if there really changes, see if there are improvements and not just changes. And when we have results, measures of success, then we will spread, then we will scale to other spots. So this is the freshman success team counting how many schools are running PDSA cycles. We see that the more they run PDSA cycles, the more likely they're and see success, the more likely the school is to change behaviors and practices. And what they're also tracking, what you see here is who's at the table making those decisions, who's running the PDSA cycles, who has the power, what's happening with that. So those are the schools that are partner school networks that you mostly fund. And I want to say that this work is also spreading. You can go ahead, Sarah, Duncan. Despite the pandemic, we were able to hold virtual demonstration visits. It was a miracle, pulled it off. So we're spreading promising practices with folks across Chicago and across the nation. And we had 2 schools who really disrupted some inequitable equity practices, and they shared their learning with folks again across the district and across the nation. So those are just samples of those things. Again, this is a credit to what you do in our school partnership network. Next one. And then we had, so Carnegie is the premier education institute on improvement science, on the science of getting better at getting better. And we are so proud. We had 10 presenters at that huge international conference. We were really, really proud of that work. And in fact, 2 of our presentations, one of our presentations was a spotlight presentation, which means they upheld NCS as doing really special work, and they held a spotlight on us for one of those presentations because of some of our outcomes. And then I have to tell you, while our freshman on track numbers preliminarily, and if you're new with us, students on track in freshman year is a great predictor of whether or not they'll graduate from high school on time. While those numbers look about the same or slightly improved, we are concerned, we are assuming that we are expecting to see drops in the number of students who are getting a 3.0 or higher. We're not surprised given the pandemic, but it's something we really want to focus on to change, because 3.0 is a predictor as to whether or not a student will finish college and will enroll in college and finish. So we've got some work to do to raise those 3.0 numbers up. And we're predicting, because that has likely dropped, we may see some drops in some other areas, and we'll certainly update you as we get the outcome data. Thank you. I know that was fast and I was rambling. We'll hold time for questions, but Sarah, thank you. You can go ahead.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my slides. Thank you so much, Jackie. I appreciate that. I wanted to look a little bit ahead for us. Jackie was talking about the theme for last year of implement, measure, refine, and we're doing a lot on measurement today. Looking ahead, we're thinking about spread, scale, and sustain. Spread, just to do some quick definitions, means replicating an intervention or initiative. If we see something that's working, how do we get other people to do it? And if you're not in the business, you might think that that just happens naturally, and we actually know that it doesn't happen naturally, and you have to work pretty hard to get people to try new things and to take them up, even if they've worked elsewhere. In terms of scaling, Sydney had mentioned in the chat, like what building the conditions for the innovations to work. And that's what we're talking about. It's building the infrastructure to support a full implementation. And sustain is how do we sustain at multiple levels? Sustain the conditions that we're talking about, sustain the innovations, sustain the mindsets that we're changing, as well as the sustainability of the school and its leadership as well. And we are thinking about this idea of subtraction, that it's not really possible to keep doing more and more and more, and that's actually not desirable. That we need to subtract in order to focus and to move the work forward. I am going back here. I wanted to talk a little bit about our scope because that has changed a good bit in the past year. So we've had a network of schools in Chicago for the last 15 years, and now we have 3 networks of Chicago high schools. The funding from our partners in Chicago supports our original partner school network, and that's what Jackie was talking about in terms of our results, and you'll hear more about instruction in a minute. And we opened 2 additional networks this year. The Freshman Success for Equity, which is supported by the Gates Foundation, and the Anti-Racist Educators network, which is focused just on disrupting inequities and building liberatory practices. So we're up to a record high of 38 partner high schools, and we're working with CPS at multiple levels with a main, really important partnership with the high school chiefs who are very strong, and we have strong partnerships with them. An ongoing partnership with the Office of Equity, and we're really looking forward to learning more and working with Skyline which is our new curriculum that was built through the Curriculum Equity Initiative. And nationally, Jackie mentioned this as well, I just wanted to say that everything that we do in Chicago, we try to bring to spread and scale nationally as well. In sort of a unanticipated, we turned our National Freshman Success Institute completely virtual in last year because we had to, and we kept it virtual this year, and we have up to 360 people attending, we're really thrilled about that. And we have multiple district and school partnerships. Charles Payne is here, and Newark is one of our key partnerships as well.
We're now going to move to what I would say is the heart of our time together today. And that is really kind of a deeper dive into our instructional work, and then a conversation with Jillian Carew and Sarah Howard. So we are delighted to welcome them. Jillian is the lead instructional coach at NCS, and Sarah is our senior director of the NCS Partner School Network. So that partnership with 18 schools. They're going to begin with this kind of brief overview, and then they're going to really go into a conversation with each other, more than a panel, a conversation about how we're using student voice this year, using student voice as data, and more into why the student experience is so important. So again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and Sarah Howard, take it away.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm gonna start by saying that I'm in an imperfect location right now. So if it's noisy in the background, apologies. And Jillian and I, we have a tendency to nerd out on this. So we hope that you'll enjoy that and join us in the breakouts, nerding out on what makes high school, what could make high school great. All right, Megan, here we go. So at NCS, in the Partner School Network in particular, we're operating from a theory that students' experience of high school drives their outcomes. When they feel connected, they feel seen and valued, that is when they do well. And our challenge has been over the last couple of years to really operationalize that belief, help schools put that into practice. So we bring 3 levers to our schools. One is, as has been mentioned at the beginning, our moral imperative as an organization to pay the educational debt to Black and Brown young people, which is really clearly stated in our equity stance. But we also bring a laser-like disciplined focus on research-proven approaches. Schools, districts can get distracted by things that we don't know are successful because they're in the business of trying to look like improvement is happening often. And so one of our tasks is to keep them focused on what we know works because there's lots of good research out there. And then finally, we concentrate our supports on adult learning rather than on direct service to students. So the NCS Partner School Network is a pretty deep partnership. We have multiple touches with each of our schools. And we focus on organizing the adults to support young people during the transitions in and out of high school when they're most vulnerable, which you'll notice under the top and bottom, freshman success coaching and post-secondary coaching. But we are also supporting them to establish a school-wide focus on instructional improvement because classrooms are where young people spend more than 90% of their school day. So that is what's going to change their experience of school is what is happening daily in the classroom, teacher by teacher. So let's talk for a second about how we approach that. In Chicago Public Schools, schools are structured so that the principal is the supervisor for every single teacher in the building, whether there are 20 teachers or 120. And we all know in the business world that, research has said that maybe 6 is the maximum direct reports you should have to be effective. So the idea that principals could effectively change teacher practice through a supervision model is just not feasible in the ways schools are structured right now. It's not going to bring the kind of change we want at the scale we want. We can't supervise our way to improvement. So educational research has said for a couple of decades that our approach has to be a collaborative, collective approach. And this is why our leadership coaches, go ahead, Megan, take the approach of helping schools organize their adults into teams. And we've probably all heard of the idea of their teachers being in departments, like the English, math, social science departments. They might go further, especially in a big school, into course teams, or in a small school where the departments are very small, they might be in professional learning communities. We also see some schools organize them into grade level teams. But however the school organizes them, we coach our schools to have an instructional leadership team where there's a representative from every teacher team on that instructional leadership team. And that group agrees on a common goal, a common student outcome goal, something we are all working toward together as a school. And then in addition to that, they choose a pedagogical approach. Here's something we're all going to learn to do better so that we can reach that student outcome goal. So they really agree on an adult learning focus. It's something they will all learn together. So we know, as Jackie mentioned earlier from research, that a high school GPA is a powerful predictor of future outcomes, that if you have a 3.0 or better, when you graduate, you are far more likely to graduate from college. You're more likely to get into a college that has a better graduation rate. And we know that that GPA begins in 9th grade. So for our young people, our Black and Brown young people, we believe that learning the ways of school must not require them to reject their cultural identity. It can't be about assimilating them into white ways of learning. It has to be about honoring the brilliance that young people bring innately. And so while as a group, we focus on changing adult behavior, we believe that bringing student experience as a central data point is one way to move toward anti-racist instruction. And Jillian's team has built on this work that I described to you, where we build the structures for collaboration around instruction. And one more click, Megan. We have zeroed in on these ILT members who lead teams as a target for some further work. And she's gonna talk about that a little further.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be in the space with you and to share my love about student voice. And so our biggest goal here, we have a vision where we want to make sure that we have classrooms in schools where students excel academically, which has always been the case in schools, right? But the piece that we really are focused in on is developing this agency and integrated identity such that they can obtain power and have successful lives as adults, right? Like that's really important for us. And the way that we hope to get there is through this idea of a 10% tipping point. You may have heard of Malcolm Gladwell's work on tipping points, but researchers and scientists have actually found that when just 10% of a population holds an unshakable belief, their belief will always be adopted by the majority of society. So oftentimes when we think about change, we think everybody, 100% of everyone needs to focus on this, but we've found that if there are small pockets of excellence, that will then permeate the school, which then will bring about the change that we want to see. And so why? The research is very clear that learning outcomes are more equitable when every young person experiences psychological safety, care and relationships, and personally relevant content and agency, right? And so focusing on these experiences also leads to an increase in motivation and engagement. And so I want you guys to take, you people, not guys and girls, to think about the survey that you took, and you talked about it a little bit in your small groups. Could you see yourself showing up more motivated in classrooms if your teachers were strategically thinking about how to improve those experiences for you? Right? And in the small groups, I heard folks talking about that. Like they even said, thinking back to my experience, like, wow, this was totally not my experience. We were not talking about these things in my classroom. And so that is the power of lifting student voice. And so when we think about the purpose of this work and also thinking about change management, we really wanted to focus our work on a research-based strategy. And so PERTS, which is the Project for Education Research That Scales, is a nonprofit institute that helps educators apply evidence-based strategies. And the thing that I love most about PERTS is that their work is not just focused on improving the student experience, but also the teacher experience. And so as you heard our co-executive directors talk about our model for the coming year, it's important that we also figure out how to sustain this work. And so our teachers have found that if young people are excited about coming to their classroom and excited about learning, guess what? They actually are excited about coming to work. And so that is really important as we think about using this strategy to move forward. And so Copilot is a platform, and I'm very careful not to use the program because educators are so sick of programs and initiatives. The thing about Copilot Elevate is it is a tool. It is a platform. It's not a program, right? So it's a tool to help teachers do all the things that they know to do, just really, really well and intentional. And so on the next slide, you'll see here, you all had an opportunity to get familiar with these learning conditions by taking that survey, but these are the 6 buckets in which we're thinking about elevating student voice around. So I'll give you a brief moment to just read them to see what those buckets are. And so a huge part of our work in investing educators in this work is when we put this up in front of teachers, the question that I always ask is, what comes up for you when you see these things? And oftentimes their response is, this makes sense. This is the work that I do as a teacher outside of affirming cultural identity. The rest of the 5 feels like things that I do already in my practice. And so it, again, just to underscore this idea that this is not a new anything, it's actually helping teachers to be intentional about the practices that they already implement in their classroom. And so we do this through a 4-step process. We elevate student voice by having them take that survey that you all just took at the beginning of this session. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. We've had students do it every month to keep shorter data cycles. Teachers then look at the feedback based on what students said on that survey. We NCS coaches support teachers through coming up with one small idea, change, or practice that they're going to implement in their classroom over the next month. And then we have them cycle again by surveying the young people to see if that small change actually worked. And we repeat the same 4-step process each month. And so just to share with you all the who and the when around our coaching model and our cycles. So this was the first year that we've implemented this PERTS survey. And we had 12 of our 16 schools take up this work. We will spread from 12 to 16 schools. From 12 to 18 schools. So all of our schools will be taking up this work in year 2. And in the 12 schools that took up this work this year, we're going to actually scale the work because in year 1, we focused on individual teachers. We didn't go into the school and say, everybody do this. We said, we want to pick one teacher who can practice this work, implement it in their classroom, and build a demo classroom. And then in year 2, we're going to scale the work from just that individual teacher to their entire team, so their department or course team. And then looking ahead to year 3, we plan to continue to scale and take it whole school. So it's like a 3-year phase process. And the last slide before we jump into our fireside chat is just to share with you all the pretty impressive results that we've seen thus far. The national growth for any learning condition per cycle is 7%. And as you can see, this teacher in particular decided to focus on this specific thing. This week in class, I got specific suggestions about how to improve my skills. And you can see from cycle 1 to cycle 2 improvement, again, improvement to cycle 3 and cycle 4. And you'll see that overall, there was a 56% jump in the amount of young people who said that they got suggestions about how to improve their skills, right? And we were only able to make this improvement by asking the young people how they were experiencing receiving feedback in their classroom and the teacher being strategic about thinking about how to respond to that data. And so we attribute this success to the hard work of the teachers and also the work that NCS coaches are doing to help them analyze data, come up with small changes, and then refine those practices as needed. So that's the work.
Thank you so much, Jillian and Sarah. That was an awesome overview. I know some of you might have some burning questions. Hold on to them or put them in the chat because we are, imagine, as Jillian said, imagine a virtual fire. And Jillian and Sarah, are you ready to, how did Sarah say it? Nerd out a little bit more with each other? Yeah?
Yeah, we always are.
Okay, good. Kayla, will you spotlight our 2 key players? Okay. Hopefully you all see Sarah and Jillian on the screen. So let's dig in. So that was an awesome overview. I think we got some details of the how, the what, and the when of the work. But talk to me for a few minutes about what does this work mean to you in the skin that you're in as lifelong educators?
I'm gonna jump in because I really appreciated something you said, Jillian, about that this energizes teachers too. I know it's something that I've heard your team talk about a lot, just the different experience as coaches in taking this approach with teachers, that when we came in with like, here's the instructional practice the schools agreed on, and I'm going to help you bring that about in your practice. Too often teachers were responding like, why me? Why are you picking me? Am I doing something wrong? Why'd the principal pick me? Right? And when we come from students' voice at the center, they're immediately like charged up. Yes, I want to do better by the kids. And it's like tapping into the original reason they became teachers in the first place. Right?
Mhm.
I've come here because I want to make a difference. And I think it's really helping us pivot, just like Charles said in the chat, right? From teaching our subjects to teaching young people. That always seemed like the difference between high school and middle school to me. High school teachers were always teaching their subjects and middle school teachers were teaching the kids. And this feels like it's empowering high school teachers to think about like teaching the young people in front of them.
For sure. And I would just say for me, it's exciting as a Black woman having experienced CPS as both a student and a teacher, because elevating student voice and centering it in our work basically positions young people as co-creators of their learning experience, right? So we knew school to be, I'm the teacher, adultism is real, right? I'm the teacher, I know what's best for you. You're gonna sit down and hopefully get good grades, right? This approach gives us an opportunity to recognize the power within our young people and understanding that they actually have the power to self-determination, right? Like determine what it is that's helpful for them. And then we position ourselves as facilitators in that learning. So it's really exciting work for me. We know our young people have been voting with their feet for, decades. And I think this is an opportunity to actually get young people excited about coming to school and coming to class.
Totally, yes. Yes, as a parent, as a CPS parent, I'm seeing that for my daughter, who is a CPS student, right? She's on the Student Voice Committee, but like the difference between feeling heard by her teachers and not, and her level of engagement in that class is totally noticeable.
Well, so let's hear a little bit more then about how do you think this approach, right? Like this is, I'm going to dare say like this is kind of leading edge for us and for what we're seeing, right? This kind of unprecedented year and the way that we are physically more distant from students than ever, but this is really tapping into students and their experience. Tell me about how this approach leads to more equitable outcomes.
I can speak from the perspective of what I love about PERTS is that the data reports give us, it disaggregates the data based on gender and also based on race. And so when we think about creating equitable experiences for young people, how I, as a Black male student, experience this teacher's class could be or probably is different than how a white female student might experience this class. And so when we think about creating equitable classroom experiences, it's important for us to have the nuance of that data as opposed to thinking about, generally speaking, young people feel like the teacher cares about me. It's not about generally speaking. Does this one individual student know that you care about them? And because PERTS focuses on individual student experiences, is not a collective to say 90% of them feel like you care, so that's a good job. It actually forces teachers to look at the one student who doesn't agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And Oh shoot, what did you just make me think of? When we were in the research presentation, right, preparing for all this and learning ourselves about the conditions, what really struck me was that it doesn't matter if the teacher thinks they are creating the conditions. What matters is if the student is experiencing the condition. And we can only figure that out by hearing from the young people, right? And so it feels, we've always known this. We've always known this, right? That the best judges of whether teachers are successful are the young people in front of them. And there was research that backed it up, that kids were the best predictors of whether teachers, when they rated teachers highly, kids' test scores in that class were going up, right? And any other rating system was not as predictive. So we've known for a long time they're the best judges. I could tell when my daughter was in kindergarten talking to her classmates, right? They could tell you if it was working or not. And so I think the more that we listen to young people and actually respond to it in a district where 90% of the students are Black and brown, the more likely we are to meet their needs.
Well, so I heard you say, meet students' needs, right? And we don't work directly with students, right? We work with educators, we work with, right? So we work with teachers or department leads, to principals, to district leaders sometimes. So I guess talk a little bit more about how does this work now, right? This PERTS work, this kind of emphasis on the student voice, how is that impacting, Jillian, specifically your coaching, and for both of you, the cross-school professional development that we do? How is this impacting you and your work?
It definitely, and I'll let Sarah speak to more of the changes that have occurred as a result of us starting this year, but I would say it really does give our team some specificity to our work and be able to speak to exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish together with our coaches. And so I think that has been game changing just in terms of sustainability for us in our work too, right? We're talking about sustainability for everyone. And so just having a clear vision, I think has been helpful. And then the other thing I'll say about just the PD and how we're working with adults, we started a classroom learning conditions collaborative this year where we brought together all the 12 schools who were taking up this work. And what I'm most proud about in that space is that we really tried hard to model for teachers what we wanted teachers to then go back and model for young people. So 70% of that professional development session was their voice, right? So if we're telling teachers, we don't want teachers standing in front of the class and speaking at young people the whole period, then when they come to our professional development sessions, we had better not be doing that, because then we're modeling for them that we are experts, right? And so 70% of that session, when they came together monthly, was about them sharing practice, them understanding and recognizing the power within, and then learning from each other. And so I think that has been game changing for our adult learning as well.
Could not agree more. I think the difference we're seeing in what Jillian's team is taking up from how we approached it in the past is that it's become more personal and abstract. That we've gone from a place where, like, on a global level, we see in our data that kids need X. And so we do some research and we think we all have to get better at Y practice. And we go about trying to learn it. And the motivation to learn it requires some commitment to the whole, some belief in the process that we went through for choosing the focus, and some vulnerability. That is like, well, why don't we think I'm already capable of this? And there's something about a survey from the young people in front of you about your classroom, not about what's happening in the school broadly, that really changed the motivation of the people engaging with our coaches. So I think it's been a powerful lever. What they have shown us this year, what Jillian's team's shown us, is that it's really powerful when it's personal, which I think is also tells us something about what young people need to experience, right? Is that when that is why I love the slide that you picked, Jillian, about specific ways I can improve. Because that's what young people are hungry for, right? Like, tell me exactly. And I can figure out how to do that. Don't just give me a big broad swipes, it was good, or, you know, what the whole class did. Like, kids want to know what's my next step. And so I think we're seeing that very same driver work for the adults.
So I've got to ask, I hear you, Sarah, I've heard you say it, and Jillian, right? Like, it's personal to the student. What is the student voice data that we have, right? And then Sarah, I hear you saying it's personal to the educator, right? Like, what does this mean to me? Jillian, could you give me like how have you or one of your coaches like helped a teacher get unstuck or like have a spark of change with this data? Like, what's something that you've seen or heard about from this kind of new work, if it's so personal, right?
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because one of the members of my team said to me, Jillian, you didn't tell me you were hiring me to be a therapist. And I cracked up about it. But what happened was, and this is just, I think, a testament to this work, is that it truly is transformational, both personally and professionally, because in order to shift from unlearning this idea that teachers are experts and young people are passively learning, I have to unlearn all these things that I've been taught, which then probably came from some biases or created some biases that I have. And so when teachers are looking at this data, one of my coaches said, literally, this was the case for her. 100% of her male students said that they felt like she cared about them, but only 60% of her female students said that. And so she had to dig really deep to say, what is it about me? What perception do I have about female students that I don't have about male students that's getting in the way of them feeling cared for, because I do care about them. And so those are the kind of sparks that happen. And so you'll hear our coaches say, like, this work didn't just transform my practice as a teacher, but it's really transforming my ways of being as a person. And I think that is so powerful.
Yes.
I love that.
Same.
All right. So, you know, Jackie kind of shared with us, right, like our theme for this past year, right, about measuring, and I hear you refining. And what do we have to look forward to this coming year, right? Spread, scale, sustain. What's coming this year for this work in schools, or for this work as people who help educators change their practice?
I saw that my little circle was off, but I think we were fortunate that Jillian and the team were thinking strategically about who would be the first round of folks to test this with. It's people who were situated on a school-wide body, so that their experience of this coaching, this tool, is already in how they talk about change and growth in classrooms. And so just by being and having had that experience, we're gonna see the work start to move to scale to other folks on the team. They might have curiosity about something that the team member says, but Jillian's team is being really now intentional about how to move from that one person and really lead through strength, right? Strength in my practice of really being reflective, of trying new things. And now I've had that experience, and I'm gonna pull others in rather than trying to tell people to do something I haven't done myself.
And I'll just share my greatest hope for this work, and this is years down the line as we hit the 10% tipping point and continue to spread and scale. But I imagine or envision a school system where we no longer have to gather together to come up with incentives for young people to increase their attendance, because young people are knocking down the doors at schools to come. because I feel seen, because I feel heard, because I feel like I'm being fed. We don't have to figure out Band-Aid fixes if we get to the root of the issue, which is positioning young people as the experts.
Yes.
I think that is a fantastic place to end. Everyone, either go off mute or do the hand to give these wonderful folks a round of applause. Thank you so much, Jillian and Sarah. You know, I hope you felt the heat of the fire, because you guys were on fire. So now we are going to have some time to talk about what we just heard in breakout rooms. We'll have a few minutes to kind of come together and take away some key points and some insights. And so what we're going to ask is, what's resonating with you from this conversation? What surprised you? What challenged you? And really, the ask of you is, how are you going to foster student voice in action from what you just heard? So we're going to go into breakout groups and have a conversation with each other. You might see Sarah or Jillian in your breakout group, and then we'll come back and have some Q&A with the two of them and with Jackie and Sarah.
So we're open for questions. I'm going to build on what Nancy said about small steps are okay, and just say that, I mean, those of you who know us, we've been focused on data for a million years, right? Like, we've been working with data forever since we started. And what's different about this data is that it's more frequent, it's more precise on certain aspects that we care about. And it allows us all, both from the coaches and the educators we work with, to learn faster. And that's the beauty of continuous improvement, that we can move, that we can learn faster and change our practice, you know, sort of that quickly, in faster cycles is what I'm trying to say. And the thing that I wanted to hold up from listening to Jillian and Sarah talk is that, although, like, this is very data heavy and it seems, in some ways, could seem very scientific, it has the effect, which is what we wanted to have, of humanizing schools, which is really, like, if I had to say in the shortest way possible, what are we trying to do? We're trying to humanize schools towards the vision that Jillian just described of, that, you know, I wouldn't be kicking my kids out the door in the morning to go to school. They'd be like, oh, school's going to be awesome. I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna be with people who care about me. I'm gonna be fulfilled.
I had a question about the one talked about this week in class. I got specific suggestions about how to improve my skills, and there were some numbers, and, you know, there was a big improvement from 27% up to 83%. I'm wondering, was that typical? Did teachers, you know, have one weakness that they could focus on and make a huge improvement? Or, I see the smile, so my guess is no, that was not so.
Thank you for that question, Mike. Definitely not typical. So 7% from cycle to cycle is the typical average nationally. What I will say is that particular, so that's the data of one specific teacher. And I would say what I've learned in this process this year is that teacher decided to stick with that same change idea for the entire year, which gave them the traction to actually make that strong of an improvement, right? So some teachers said, hey, I'm gonna focus on this thing, this cycle. Next cycle, I'm gonna change and do something else. And next cycle, I'm gonna change and do something else, which there's some value in that. And we can see small changes across the different learning conditions. But if a teacher really said, I'm gonna stick with this one feedback for growth the entire year, then you can see that kind of change. I mean, still not, what's happening across the nation. We're leading the pack there. But yes, thank you for acknowledging that.
Jillian, there's another one in the chat about examples of change ideas.
Yep, so let's go with that teacher for that data. What happened was, she's an English teacher, has been in education 12 years now and struggled to be what she deems as a good writing teacher. And so I asked her, what kind of feedback are you giving young people? And so she's like, you know, I tell them good job, or I really enjoy reading your piece, something like that. And so I said, if they were to go home and their parents asked them what they learned in writing today or what they're really good at, could they answer that question? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, that's probably because you haven't told them the specific skills in writing that they are good at and the specific skills that they need to improve. And so we chunked that up for her. And I knew from the beginning what kind of feedback I wanted her to be able to give, but it had to evolve over the 5 cycles because I wanted her to lead that work in her own learning. So the first thing was she decided she was going to give a specific glow and a grow on their piece of writing once a week. That started with good job here, so you're good at picking out evidence, work on supporting details. That was the first cycle. The second cycle, she noticed, I could be a little bit more specific. And so she's changed her language to say, the skill that you are proficient at is, I am wondering about you developing your argument of, ideas or something like that, right? And so then at the end of that, she morphed into giving young people feedback who didn't even turn in the assignment. She had never done that before. But what she did was she was establishing relationships with young people who didn't turn in the work, and she was still giving them feedback to say, hey, I kind of missed your writing this week. Is everything okay? Do we need to check in? And she also decided to give young people feedback even when they got a perfect score on the writing assignment, which was not something that she had done before, to say, hey, you got an A on this, good job. And you could have stretched your thinking and your writing by doing XYZ. So that was something she hadn't even thought to do before we started on this journey together.
Thank you so much. That's a rich set of examples, Jillian. For Jillian or Sarah, there's a question about what are we learning about creating the conditions across the school, is sort of beyond the survey itself.
Conditions for engaging in this kind of coaching? Conditions for what?
Sydney, do you care to clarify?
Yeah, I mean, the conditions for belonging, for example, or the conditions for teachers across a school to engage in the work.
Mm-hmm. I would say, I don't know if we're learning things about belonging across the school as a whole from this survey in particular, because it really is about what's happening in this classroom with this teacher. But I would say that we've learned a lot over the years about how do we create the conditions where teachers take the risk of making their practice public with each other so that they can learn more and learn from each other. And I guess one of the things I think I've learned is that there are a few moves that we can make to start to build that community, but very often it requires people to actually risk making their practice public to learn that it's okay to do it. Like if they're feeling hesitant, they're not going to be convinced in advance of trying it that it's safe. They have to try it to learn that it is. So I think we're going to have to lean hard into that this year as Jillian's team scales from a single person to a full team of really sort of coaching heavy and pushing people to take the risk.
If I could just add to that, I want to build off what you said, Sarah, and what Jillian said earlier, like of the parallel nature. I mean, we're all human beings, the parallel nature for what's happening with the young people in the schools and what's happening for teachers. We want them all to be learning and taking risks and feeling that they belong and feeling that they're supported. And I just wanted to name like the way that Jillian helped guide her teacher by giving her specific feedback was very similar to what she wanted the teacher to do in terms of giving specific feedback. So it's really a parallel set of conditions under which human beings learn. And they're the same conditions for different ages, even though there are some specifics like by age level. Generally speaking, it's there's more commonalities than differences. And it's 4:30, and we are so grateful to have you with us at this, for this update and really appreciate your questions and your engagement. We can stay on if anyone has another question to ask, but we want to formally adjourn. And thank you so much for joining us.